Hey everybody, Danielle Hargenrader here. Welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Today, I'm very excited to bring you the husband of a lovely wife that I already interviewed. Robert Barry has a master's in computer engineering and a PhD in biomedical engineering and conducts high-field MRI research on the human brain and spinal cord. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 8 years ago when he was 29 years old. Together, he and his wife, Laura, who I mentioned also has type 1 diabetes, work to increase awareness of diabetes and also advocate for exercise and proper nutrition because they want everybody to feel as great as they do. So, Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for having me on your show today.
Oh, my pleasure. So as we always do here in the beginning, we want to hear about you, your diabetes story. And I said that before that not often do we hear about a lot of people getting diagnosed as adults. So since you were diagnosed at 29, give us a little rundown of your story of diagnosis and kind of the last 8 years, how your diabetes life has progressed.
Sure. Well, when I was 29, I was finishing up the last year of my PhD. So it was a very difficult time, very stressful. Near the end, I really wasn't feeling well. I put on a little bit of weight, like most people do when they probably spend too much time staring at computer screens and books. And I knew that my health was slipping a little bit. But I thought that, I'd graduate and move on and get back to where I was before. I started dating Laura about a year prior. And as Laura mentioned in her show, I really didn't know that much about diabetes when I started dating her. There was one story of when I went over to her house to play a board game. And I remember I went to put something in the trash under her kitchen sink, and there was a big bucket of needles there. Of course, I'm like, okay, where's the door? Like, should I make a run for it right now? This girl's a drug addict.
She keeps her needles under the kitchen sink. That's just even more weird.
Exactly. And I talked with her about it afterwards, and I said, so you have a bucket of needles there? And she's like, oh, I'm diabetic. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go home and I Google diabetes, and I try to learn as much as possible about it, just because I kind of liked her, and I thought, well, if I'm going to be with her for the long run, I should probably know everything that I can know about diabetes. And that was actually a very fortuitous thing, because a year later I would be diagnosed myself. And of course, I didn't know that at the time. So it was actually fun dating Laura when I was not yet officially diagnosed. I wanted to learn about my blood sugars as a then non-diabetic. So for example, I would go out and I would test my blood sugar. I would use her tester, change the Lancet, and test my blood sugar before meals. She would test her blood sugar 2 hours after, so I would test my blood sugar 2 hours after. So I would actually get into it because I wanted to see a little bit about what her life was like. I still remember a couple months before my diagnosis, and it really did happen very suddenly for me. I remember we went over to her mom's house. We had a lovely dinner, and I remember eating a big chunk of chocolate cake.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking, I wonder what my sugars are going to do after this. And I checked my sugars like an hour and a half later after eating this big piece of chocolate cake, and they were fine. So when I was finishing up my thesis, like I said, it was a very stressful time. I wasn't feeling good. I knew something was wrong with me. Stress had a lot to do with it, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. And at first, we didn't think it had anything to do with diabetes, because a couple months prior, I had tested my blood sugar after eating a huge meal, a couple hundred carbs, and it was fine.
Yeah.
But the night where we knew that something was wrong and we knew it was diabetes was one night I went over to Laura's place. We had a lovely dinner, and afterwards I had that urge to urinate. So I went to the bathroom, came back. And 20 minutes later, when my bladder was still not full, I had that feeling again. And I went and came back, but nothing came out. And another 20 minutes went by, and Laura was like, do you have to go to the bathroom again? I said, yeah, I don't know why. And so she said, I think we need to check your sugar again. And I said, yes, I think so. And I checked my sugar with her meter, and I think I was about 18 in the Canadian International units, which is like over 300 US. So at that point, we checked again. We got the same number, and Laura said, "All right, brush your teeth. We're going to the ER to get you some insulin."
Wow.
And so that was kind of how it started. And it was funny, even when we got to the ER, because I must have been the first person there to basically test my sugar and diagnose myself right when something like that happened. You know, I went to the triage nurse, and she was like, "Well, why are you here?" I said, "My blood sugar is 300 or 18." And I said, "Well, how do you know that?" I said, "Well, I tested my sugar." "Well, how did you test it?" "Well, my girlfriend is type 1 diabetic." "Well, why did you test it?" "Because I'm aware of the symptoms of diabetes." I read. And same thing when we went to see the doctor. He said, "Oh, it's probably something else. We're going to use our, more accurate meter than what you have." And he tested. He's like, "Oh yeah, you're diabetic." That's why I'm here. So I got my first shot of insulin. In Canada, with our healthcare system, the very next morning, I had an appointment scheduled with a diabetes educator and an endocrinologist the very next morning. Spent the next day, learning all about, nutrition. And that was kind of the first day of the rest of my life.
Yeah,
So,
that's to me, it's so interesting about the quickness with which it progressed, having the cake and being fine. And then a couple months later, all of a sudden it's like, because you hear a lot of stories, and of course the human body is just absolutely crazy, and you can never say that one thing is going to be the same, but they say about catching it early, and it takes so much time to progress, and you go through this honeymoon phase, but it sounds like your body was just like, meh, we're going straight for it. And actually I was talking to my husband about it, because I was saying how I was interviewing you today. He's like, well, maybe he got sympathy diabetes, joking around. I said, well, don't you feel bad about it. Don't you get it too?
Yeah, of course, the running joke is that, I caught diabetes from Laura. We're like, well, I don't think it worked that way. But
no, I mean, and the thing is, it's funny, I think I said this to Laura too, is that when I was dating back, years ago, I'm married almost 9 years now, but I did have a guy ask me, because he, just like you, he didn't know about diabetes. He's like, well, is it contagious? And I'm like, no, it's going to be fine. But yeah, so obviously you had quite an advantage coming into being diagnosed, having spent so much time with somebody who had diabetes, but also you did so much of your own research because you were interested in knowing what your girlfriend's life was like. So what was it like, just kind of transitioning into, did Laura help you out with, just getting adjusted, or what was that like for you, having that kind of like a live-in coach?
Well, I have to say, Laura really did make all the difference. One of the things that I've learned over the last 8 years of being diabetic is support is the number one thing. You can know what to eat, you can know how to exercise, you can know how much insulin to take, but unless you have the support of people, 365 days a year, it's going to be a rocky road. So from day one, I basically sat down with Laura and talked about, how things were going to be. For example, I loved root beer. That was kind of my little guilty pleasure. And honestly, since that day, I haven't had root beer since. I had a talk with myself. I looked myself in the mirror and basically said, all right, this has happened. There's no going back. The Rob that, used to eat lots and have desserts, and that's just not who I'm going to be anymore. So very much it was all right, I have two choices. One choice is to make changes today and be healthy for the rest of my life, or to be sick and die.
So I like that you just saw that as such a black and white decision, because so many people don't see it that way. Myself included. Back, I was diagnosed 25 years ago, and I went through a very tumultuous period of time in my life where I was 200 pounds. I had an eating disorder. I was just thought diabetes was a curse, and I was, my life was over. But then as I matured and I grew up and I learned a lot more about actually the human brain, but more in a psychological point of view, is that it really is a black and white. It's my choices that are going to determine the outcome of my life, the quality of my life, the quality of my health, the quality of my mindset. Either I can make the choices that I know, like you said, we all know that eating vegetables and, fruits and things that are coming from the earth, not things coming from a package, are going to serve us and we're going to feel better. But most people don't do it. But I just kind of, like you, Grass, I'm like, okay, either I can do this or I don't do this. It actually is that simple. And I love that you were able, and I think, I mean, I don't know for sure, but the male brain is a little easier in differentiating, okay, this or that, done, cut it off. But I like that you did that, and I'm sure that that decision has served you well over the years.
Absolutely. When I was diagnosed, when I first went to the endocrinologist, I got my hemoglobin A1C, and I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was around 8, which was only like, slightly elevated. Some people well over 10. So literally it had just happened. So my pancreas just kind of fell off a cliff, I guess, and took me along with it. So when I started this with Laura, basically we made some decisions. All right, we're going to start to eat healthy. And that actually worked for her too. And this is the biggest thing for support, is that because both Laura and I are type 1, we support each other every day. When we go to, first of all, we actually prepare almost all of our meals at home, because that's just, it's the easiest. You know exactly what is in your food. Almost all of my high blood sugars over the last 8 years have been after going out to restaurants.
I have to second that as being absolutely true.
Exactly.
Same here. I mean, I'm happy that I love to cook food. That's just something that's I'm passionate about cooking, but yeah, that's where my high blood sugars come, eating outside of my house. Absolutely.
Exactly. So you go to a restaurant and you pay an enormous amount of money and have high blood sugars, and then you're up throughout the night testing and doing corrections to try to bring it back down. It's just not worth it. So, but when Laura and I do go out, we almost always have salads. Quite often she orders first, and I just say ×2. We love salads, and of course salads are kind of healthy. So when we talk with people who genuinely don't know a lot about diabetes or diabetics, we sometimes get asked the question, well, what does a diabetic eat? And my answer is always what everybody should eat. We eat lots of vegetables, we eat some fruits, and we try to minimize the processed foods that we eat. Then we hear people sometimes say, well, what does a diabetic do for exercise? It's like, same thing what everyone should do for exercise. We like to walk. We deliberately park on the far end of a parking lot to add a few extra minutes to when we walk in to go shopping. I try whenever possible to do workouts. You see the exercise equipment behind me. Laura and I just did our workout this morning. And when we do our workouts together, we feel good together. And then we eat our breakfast together. And it just works out so well, having that support. We all have good days, we all have bad days. We have high blood sugars, we have low blood sugars. And each one is there to support the other when the help is needed.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. I'm not good. I'm really glad my husband does not have diabetes, and I would never want him to. But I just think depending on the person's attitude would certainly determine the dynamics of the relationship. I'm lucky because my husband is super smart and loves to learn. So much like you, when we started dating 9-10 years ago, he learned a ton about diabetes too on his own. He just did tons of research, and he found out, but he also found some information that may not have been as good, just like because you go online and you find a lot of like doom and gloom, and people with diabetes are destined to have this, that, and the other thing. So he had to learn A, through his own research, but B, through spending time with me and realizing that I wasn't limited in what I could do. I could travel and have fun and go and do anything that I wanted. And then now over time, now he's just like, he knows when my blood sugars are high or low. I'll just say to him, I'm like, my blood sugar's high, just let's not have this conversation right now. And he'll just be like, cool, like let's talk about this later. He's very supportive. If I need a juice box, can you get me a juice box? And he gets it for me. He's just very super supportive of whatever I need. But I don't know, the thought of him having diabetes is just like, to me, is just like, it makes my brain explode a little bit. But yeah, so having that support in-house is, I would say, probably the best thing you could ever get. But, outside of, having it in-house, that's why I'm such a big proponent of the diabetes online community, because people don't realize how many of us are out there, in chat rooms and forums. Things like 2diabetes.org, which is an online forum where you can go and talk to hundreds, thousands of other people with diabetes any time of day or night about any topic that you might want to talk about. And people just, until they actually take that step outside of their comfort zone, because they feel like, oh, well, I don't know these people, and I don't know if I want to talk. But as soon as they do it, and this is that I've heard this from so many people, including myself, it feels like this weight gets lifted off of you, because you're like, oh, yeah, this person knows exactly what I'm talking about. And then they might say something that you're like, oh my God, that happens to me too. And then just that feeling of connectedness on just getting it is so profound. And it might seem like just such this whatever type thing, but until you get that level of support where you can have that conversation with somebody who actually has diabetes too, it really is invaluable. And that's why I always encourage people, even if you don't want to talk right away, you don't want to say anything, even going into a Facebook group where there's conversations going on about diabetes, you could join hundreds of groups that are diabetes related and just read what other people are saying without actually jumping in at first, which I think is super valuable as well, because at least you're sitting around reading with what other people that you actually can relate to on the same level as. And I just, again, with, like you said, the support, no matter where you can get it, I think is invaluable. And we're lucky to have that online outlet, as when I was diagnosed in 1991, online wasn't like a thing. There was no computer. I mean, there was no Google. So, I mean, yeah, it's a huge resource to have. So, so do you do any other than, I know you, I think, are you also a Medtronic ambassador as well as Laura, or what do you do as far as advocacy for that?
So I guess currently I'm informally a Medtronic ambassador. I definitely tell everyone about my Medtronic pump, and I do all that I can to raise awareness that there are insulin pumps, and even the closed loop sensors that are hopefully going to be coming online soon with pending FDA approval. That's very exciting stuff. So sometimes people email me and say, "Hey, did you see this article? And they tested something in mice, and what do you think about this?" And obviously, this is actually funny. Laura, I think, brought to show me some newspaper clippings that her parents gave her in, I think it was '86, right after she was diagnosed about diabetes. And a lot of those, I mean, it's amazing. There's a post somewhere on her timeline, and it says, the future of diabetes, cures may be on the horizon. And so this was, I guess, going on 29 years ago, that the headline said that diabetes is going to be cured soon. Obviously, it hasn't been. And I personally know several people doing diabetes research, various stages of it. And I'm a little bit more, honestly, a little bit more pessimistic or realist. This is a very complicated illness. It affects your entire endocrine system. Everybody is different. And this is one of the things I was going to mention. Laura and I, despite the fact that we have almost the same sleep schedule, almost the same, diet, almost the same exercise schedule, how she and I control it it's actually quite a bit different. There's many differences. So I don't know if a cure, quote unquote, is going to be available in our lifetime, but I think the technology is increasing to the point where it will be the next thing to a cure. I'm really excited about the closed loop monitors, because that's the big problem. When you do a correction right before bed and you go to sleep, if your blood sugar dips down too low, bad things can happen. So the technology is getting to the point now where there's really no difference between what I can do and what someone without type 1 diabetes can do. And that's the main thing. You just have to be more careful with, how you live your life, which is not a bad thing, really.
No, not at all. I think that the awareness that having diabetes can bring to a person if they allow it to, which I think is a huge part of it, because we have this opportunity to see this, disease as an opportunity to, what I like to refer to as, turning an adversity into an advantage, or we have this ability to perceive this adversity as the end of our lives. And I think that a lot of people do see it that way. And it's unfortunate. The thing is, for me, is that it's made me the healthiest version of myself that I've ever been now. And I get healthier every year because I learn more. And, I've made my career around helping other people with their health. And I went to college for nutrition and, all that stuff. But that all happened, I truly believe, because of having diabetes. I mean, my family, other than my mom, who's a healthy person, but, every other person in my family is passed away or obese or unhealthy. I have about 5 living family members, and they've died from a variety of things, of heart disease and cancer and, just unhealthy lifestyles. And not because, this is just the way, a lot of people are in the world. And I'm oddly enough, I mean, I'm grateful for having diabetes to open my mind about what is and isn't possible for the progression of the human body and health. And I think, not, to say anything else, but I feel like I'm healthier with diabetes than most other 33-year-old women without it, just because of the fact that I take so much pride and actually I put it as such a high priority that my health come first. And then that allows me to, do other things with more energy, with more vitality, and just more confidence, because I know that I feel good and that I have my, diabetes under control. And when you do have that feeling of control, as control is such an interesting word, but when you feel like you have control, whether you do or not, it really does translate into other parts of your life. So I think that's a huge an advantage. And my goal is to help other people see it that way, because I really think it's as much as a mindset shift as anything else, because I spent 10 years of my 25 years of diabetes thinking it was a curse and that I was a bad person and somehow I deserved, to have a horrible life, with disease. And now to me, that's a silly point of view to have had. But if I hadn't had that, wouldn't be where I am today. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, the brain. So actually, speaking of that, I wanted to ask you, and this is just totally, I don't know if it's off subject, but has having diabetes, obviously you study the brain as a doctor. That's to me super incredibly fascinating. I'm like a medical nerd. I love science. So like has having diabetes swayed or adjusted like what things that you want to study about the brain, or has it influenced your career in any way?
It has made some slight changes to my trajectory as a researcher. I do studies with currently spinal cord injury and MS and cancer, but I have actually had the opportunity to get involved in a couple of studies related to diabetes. And not to get into all the details, but basically one thing that I have been learning and that I have used it for myself, and when we talk with people to try to encourage them to lead a healthier and happy life, is that the component that a lot of people might not realize is that in managing diabetes, it actually involves the brain. And the reason is because you can't out-exercise a bad diet. And it's not just about calories in and energy expenditure as well. So, for example, over the Christmas holidays, I was doing some last-minute shopping, and I went to get a salad at the convenience store, or not the convenience store, at the food court at the mall that I was in. And I went and I got a nice salad, and I sat down and I ate my nice salad. There was no lineup there for the salad. Right in front of me, as I sat there and ate my salad, there was a lineup for, I won't say the name of it, but it was a place that sold French fries, primarily. The lineup, I couldn't see the end of it. So here we are, December 20-something, and there's a lineup of literally 35, 40 people waiting to buy French fries to eat for lunch. And I sat there thinking, what is going on in those people's brains? Because, well, it's not healthy. Everyone in that line knows that French fries are not healthy, yet the choice they're making is to spend half an hour waiting to eat something that's not healthy. And that really does reflect on what I've been studying and learning with the brain, is that, we are creatures of habit, and a lot of that habit has to do with the reward centers and the pleasure centers in the brain. And there is a positive reinforcement mechanism. If you eat the fattening food, you feel good for a short period of time. And there's that link there in the brain that says, oh, the last time I ate fattening food, I felt good. I'm going to eat more of it. And then I'm going to eat more of it. So in addition to gaining weight that's not wanted, you're also reinforcing that pathway in the brain, which makes it easier and easier. You're digging a rut. And it's not impossible to get out of that rut, but it gets harder and harder with time. So this is the thing, when I talk with people about what to change, is that you have to realize you're not just measuring calories in and out, you're also having to retrain your brain basically how to do something. The brain is plastic and it can change, but what it does is it takes time and it takes consistency. So I know you advocate the choices that people make. Everyone knows the right choice. 95% of people don't make the right choice. much of that difference has to do with the fact that people don't have necessarily the support that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things you just said is,
I want to eat a piece of dessert, but Laura says, you know what? Remember the last time you ate a piece of dessert? You didn't feel good. No, I felt like garbage. Okay, I'll pass on the dessert. And so
I want to have somebody to remind you of that.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the things that I've been learning, is that it's so important to be consistent and really stick to your goals and your decisions. And people don't have to wait until January the 1st. There's nothing miraculous about that number to make a change. You know, starting today, when somebody's watching this video, you know, they can say, all right, I need a support system. I need to retrain my brain how to eat healthy. You know, I need to retrain my body, what it feels like to go for a walk, to go for a jog, to pick up those, those weights, to do some pull-ups. And once your body becomes more and more accustomed to the healthier foods and the exercise, you'll start to feel great. And then you'll have some endorphins going through your body. And endorphins make you feel good. So therefore, you're retraining your brain that exercise and feeling good and having good blood sugars makes me feel healthy. And I'll probably live much longer than people that don't have type 1 diabetes and don't take as good care of their bodies.
Yeah, very true. You said so many things there that, of course, I have something to say about. But what you really remind me of is I'm a huge follower, I hate that word, but fan of Tony Robbins. I mean, back in 2008, went to a seminar, and the way he explained it about neuroplasticity, about how, like you said, the pathways, he explained it in a way that really kind of got to me. And I think it's more of in a layman's terms, which, as someone who's not, a doctor of neuroscience. So for me, he said kind of like the way we do things when we make that choice over and over again is that it's like it creates a rope, like the synapses that go off in the brain. So every time you do that, that rope gets another strand, another strand, another strand, until that thing's like a cable. But the thing is that you can start peeling away those little pieces of that cable by like you said, reprogramming. But the more you do it over and over again, the stronger that rope gets, the stronger that cable gets. And, you have to work to reverse that kind of pattern that you had put in there. But the good news is that if you put in new patterns, you do consistently, like you said, the exercising, then your brain's going to get that rope for exercise. Your brain's going to get that rope for salads. You're going to associate that feeling of good, healthy vitality with those new things, and that eventually those other ones will get weaker and weaker and weaker, and that if you wanted those to come back as strong, you'd have to actually go back to that habit and do it. And doing that might end up bringing you a lot more pain, so much so that you wouldn't do it anymore at all, which is, I believe, very much what happened to me, as far as my old eating patterns and how I eat now. The thought of eating the way I used to eat, actually, like I can physically feel, I feel sick, like in my body, if I think about eating that way, because I know what it was doing to me. And and it actually becomes like this painful, the pain of the thought of it is so much so that I just won't do it. I'd rather just stick with what I know works. And I think that's really important for people to understand, is that, yeah, habits take time to build, they take time to break, but it's totally possible to break old habits and build new ones, no matter how old you are. It doesn't matter. Age has nothing to do with it. And yeah, the brain is a fascinating place. So
it certainly is.
Yeah. So as I always ask here towards the end, I like to know, for you, someone who was diagnosed as an adult and obviously has an awesome live-in diabetes partner support group, and just being as, I think, kind of like a go-getter as you are, because you kind of just took like the bull by the horns when you got diagnosed, and you're like, this is what it is, this is how it's going to be, boom, done. What are Robert's top 3 tips for thriving with diabetes now?
Well, the number one, as I've already mentioned, is support. And support can come from many different forms. I'm lucky to have immediate support from my wife, who is also type 1 diabetic. Most people don't have that case, though. So if people don't have family members or friends with type 1 diabetes that they can talk with and share stories, as you mentioned, there are numerous resources online. And it's a great way to meet people, even just to read and learn about other people's stories. People have to realize that once they're diagnosed, they're not alone. And in fact, the number of type 1 diabetics is increasing. So we are not alone. We are a community, and we can learn from each other. Seeing our endocrinologists is one important piece of the puzzle, but we only see them every maybe 3 or 6 months. All the rest of the time, we need support from friends or family or some online community. So that would be my #1 recommendation for somebody who is new. My #2 recommendation is to be patient. I talked with one of my friends who's a diabetes researcher, and he referred to type 1 diabetes as a condition that's basically math. I asked him for his recommendation of how to manage it, and he said, well, be good at math. And there was actually a paper that was published a few years ago that, not surprisingly, showed that people that are better at math do better at managing type 1 diabetes. So when we control our blood sugars, like we are starting a new exercise routine today, and on the piece of paper upstairs, Laura and I both wrote down our blood sugars before and after our workout, which was predominantly anaerobic. And then we saw that it went up, which was kind of expected.
So just real quick, for people that don't know, anaerobic means without oxygen, which means very high intensity. I just like to, because I know like people, I'm in exercise science, most people might not know what that means. It means like you can't hold a conversation because you're out of breath. So.
Exactly. So aerobic, primarily aerobic exercise would be going for a run. And anaerobic, we did a lot of weightlifting and pull-ups and push-ups today. So we have learned over many years now that our blood sugars act totally differently when we do predominantly anaerobic versus aerobic activity. So we have to write those things down. So we knew that our blood sugars typically went up a little bit of the stress from all the weightlifting. So we wrote that down on a piece of paper. We counted the carbs for our dinner very carefully. I could tell you exactly how many carbs I had for breakfast this morning. So could Laura. So basically, we try to write everything down. Now, we don't write down everything every day, but when we're making changes, when we are trying some new foods, we try to keep records. Why? Because if something doesn't go right, we want to go back. A few days ago, I ate a pear and my blood sugar went high. And I think I estimated 20 for the pear, and I talked to Laura, and she's like, no, actually, pear is more like 30, 35. Oh, okay. So I ate a pear yesterday. I took the 35 carbs. My blood sugar was fine afterwards. So, you have to be aware. If you want to change, the most important thing is knowing where you are like today. So write down what your numbers are today, and then through time, you'll be able to see how those change. So that's kind of my #2 recommendation, is to be patient, write things down, so you can see trends over time. That's what really matters.
I want to just jump in and say one thing about that I super, super support that, because it's totally true. One of the biggest things I say, it's cliche, but it's true. You can't manage what you don't measure. So if you don't have measurements about where you are and you want to change, it's like, well, where do you want to change to? You don't know where you are right now. It's like, it's almost like a silly, like, I get that you want to change, but we have to figure out where we are now and where it is that we want to be, so we can draw a pseudo map to get there. I mean, obviously it's not going to be perfect, but you have to have some type of idea. And the other thing I want to say is that I like what your friend says about math. I do not love math, however, so I equate that to, I love science. So I kind of view myself as like a walking science experiment. So I get to experiment. It's like, okay, well, this is my blood sugar when I eat this, and I took this many units of insulin, and this is what happened. And obviously there's a lot of addition and subtraction, but which I think most of us are fairly decent at handling. So maybe you don't have to love math, but you have to be a little bit flexible on your ideas about, yourself being a living science experiment, which I think all humans are. I just think people with diabetes have to take that to the end. Like, you have to be like, you're constantly an experiment. You have to measure, and you have to report, and you have to track, so you can go back and measure your progress. But yeah,
absolutely.
So like no math. I know it's fine.
Yeah, I guess in general science, Laura and I, we definitely consider ourselves to be our own little guinea pigs. And from time to time, we've done things just to see what happens to our body.
Yeah, we've done that.
Things change with the seasons a little bit. Our activity level, that really affects our basal rates. So we also use a lot of the features of the pump. We just don't do a single bolus. We use like the square wave, the dual wave, temporary basals. I've got 2 different temporary basal settings. So we definitely use all the technology that's available today to try to manage it as best as possible. But you're absolutely correct. If you don't write things down, if you don't know what your numbers are, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I guess
guessing.
and I guess the third thing, in an interesting way, is because Laura and I are very similar in what we do every day, but how we manage our diabetes is actually fairly different. I guess the third recommendation that might be kind of interesting is try not to compare yourselves with others. You know, you see people sometimes posting, you know, that their blood sugar is always high. But then you see people posting that their blood sugar is almost always within, you know, the good range. You know, I have good days. I have bad days. I was a little bit more lazy over the Christmas holiday, spending time with family, and I'll tell you, my blood sugars were a little bit higher than I liked them to have been. The last 2 or 3 days, my blood sugars have been back down to where they are. So if you can be patient and record these numbers, you will be able to work with your, you know, support educators and your endocrinologist and your nutritionist to figure out what needs to happen with your numbers to change them. Over the last few years, I've kept records, and I see that, oh, I need a little bit more insulin with my mealtime bolus. So I've tweaked that number slightly. But that's because I was patient and I wrote things down, and I realized that this was a gradual trend over time with me that likely was a real effect due to how my body is using insulin. So Laura and I, you know, we need different amounts of insulin. How we react to exercise can be very different, even if it's the exact same exercise. So I just tell people, don't beat yourself up. Everybody has a high blood sugar once in a while. Get over it. It'll come back down. The main thing is being consistent over time and doing your best, and forget the rest.
Yeah, I think that's totally a huge point too. I say this, I mean, I work with people with diabetes and not, you know, just to get healthy. And one of the worst things you can do is compare yourself to someone else, because you are not that person. We are only our person. And not, again, with kind of a cliche thing, comparing apples to oranges, that apple's never going to be that orange, and that orange is never going to be that apple under any circumstance. So it's like, it's almost like a moot comparison. It's not, it really truly has no bearing in reality about comparing yourself and your own results to other people. Now, I think it's good to see what other people are doing and kind of, you know, internalizing that and saying, well, what part of that might I be able to work into my routine, and how could I, you know, that's why I'm actually doing right now. And, you know, I'm not sure if when I release this interview, I'll still be doing it, but I'm doing a 30 days of Dexcom thing that I just decided I wanted to be completely transparent. Because people say to me, oh, you have such good blood sugars and this, and I was like, I do most of the time because I put this as a high priority, but guess what? And that's why I decided to do it over Christmas. So I'm on day 16 now of like posting my Dexcom 24-hour line. But yeah, so like you see over the holidays, like I was more like, you know, going on one night, I turned my high alarm off, and you saw me I shot right up to 400 because I turned my high alert off and I went to sleep. And, you know, but then now that I'm back in my routine and I'm not like, cause on Christmas, like you, Christmas Eve, I went to my family's house, Christmas Day, went to my family's house, and then New Year's Eve was eating some stuff. And it's like this whole week was just kind of haphazard. Whereas the majority of time in my life, I'm on a fairly set schedule where I just eat at the same times and I eat a lot of the same stuff, not because, you know, I feel like I have to, but because I like it. And that's what makes me feel good. And that's what makes my blood sugars stay in that line. But you'll see, and that's why I wanted to do the 30 days and do it around a holiday to just show people, it's like, look, I'm just like you, just like everyone else. I do this too. But the reason that I am in those graphs most of the times now is because it's my number one priority in life. And I find that people find that hard to do for themselves because they feel like if they put themselves and their health as a top priority, that it somehow takes away from other things, like maybe your children or your husband or spouse or your job. But the thing is that I feel like that's completely opposite, is that when you are able to put yourself first, every relationship that you have with everything else in your life, every person in your life, every job, every interaction just becomes more enriched, because you are willing to say, I deserve to come first and my health is super important. And then when I feel healthy and vital and vibrant, that just vibes out to the world and everything else I do. And, you know, so having that as a top priority is not selfish. It's actually the best thing that I can do for myself as a healthy human being. And so, yeah, so many good tips. You had some great tips. Yeah. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with the diabetes community or those who love us who might be watching right now?
Well, I think the only thing that I would like to say in closing is, you know, to have fun with life. You know, we only have one life, and, you know, I think that Laura and I are going to live a very long and happy life And having diabetes is not something that I really would have picked per se, but now that I have it and the card has been dealt, I would say I'm happy, because now we are taking our health as our #1 priority, whereas before that might not have been my #1 priority. But now Laura and I, our health is our #1 priority. Every day we strive to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be, and we look forward to a long and happy future growing old together. We're not worrying at all about the complications of diabetes because we are dominating it.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. Couldn't have said it better myself. And I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. And I look forward to seeing what you and Laura bring to the world and continue to bring to the world and feel good and help other people feel good as well. So thank you to Robert. And if there's any way that Robert wants you to be able to get in contact with him, we haven't chatted about it, but he'll tell me, and I will link under the video, Facebook pages, etc. And I will link that under the video as usual, under the YouTube video and under the blog as well. So if you want to get in touch with Robert, he'll tell me how to let you know how to do that. So thank you so much for joining us, guys, and I will catch you guys on the next episode of Unleash Your Inner Diabetes Dominator. Take care.